I'm Dr. Marcus Thorne, and I spent 21 years as a forensic pathologist at the Riverside Regional Medical Examiner's Office in Burlington, Vermont, or at least I was until I submitted my resignation 9 months ago. What I'm about to tell you about is the one autopsy that made me question everything I thought I knew about death itself and ultimately led me to leave forensic pathology entirely. The Riverside Regional facility serves all of northern Vermont and portions of New Hampshire, handling some of the most complex forensic cases in New England. It's a state-of-the-art facility with 6 autopsy suites, advanced toxicology labs, and partnerships with major universities for specialized research. During my 2 decades there, I performed over 5,200 autopsies, consulted on federal cases, and served as an expert witness in more than 300 trials. When you've been in forensic pathology as long as I have, you develop what we call clinical distance, the ability to examine death with scientific objectivity rather than emotional response. I've autopsied victims of the most heinous crimes imaginable, studied the effects of rare diseases, and analyzed remains that have been subjected to fire, water, extreme cold, and every form of trauma the human body can endure. My specialty was complex decomposition cases and unusual preservation scenarios. I'd examined bog bodies, glacial discoveries, and victims found in sealed environments. I thought I had seen every possible way the human body could be affected by death and time. I was wrong. A typical day at Riverside Regional began at 6:30 a.m. with a review of overnight cases. We averaged 12 mice 15 autopsies per week, ranging from routine natural deaths to complex homicide investigations. My team consisted of 2 other pathologists, Dr. Sarah Chen Rodriguez and Dr. James Mackenzie, along with 4 autopsy technicians and a full forensic support staff. I prided myself on being thorough and methodical. Every case received the same careful attention, whether it was an 89-year-old who died peacefully in their sleep or a suspicious death requiring extensive investigation. My reports were known throughout the state for their precision and attention to detail. Defense attorneys dreaded seeing my name on expert witness lists because they knew I would present findings that were unassailable from a scientific standpoint. In my field, reputation is everything. Forensic pathologists are called upon to provide answers in humanity's darkest moments, to speak for the dead when they cannot speak for themselves. Families depend on us to provide closure. The justice system depends on us to provide facts. I had never encountered a case where I couldn't provide both. Burlington sits on the eastern shore of Lake Champlain, surrounded by the Green Mountains and steeped in history dating back to the early 1700s. The region has seen waves of settlement, from French fur traders to Irish immigrants fleeing the potato famine, to more recent arrivals seeking Vermont's rural lifestyle and progressive values. Our medical examiner's office regularly handles cases that reflect this diverse history. We've examined remains from forgotten family cemeteries, investigated deaths in remote mountain cabins, and processed cases involving everything from skiing accidents to rare tropical diseases brought back by world travelers. The area's climate creates unique challenges for forensic investigation. Vermont's cold winters can preserve remains in remarkable ways, while the humid summers accelerate decomposition. I had seen bodies perfectly preserved by sub-zero temperatures and others reduced to skeletal remains within weeks during hot, wet weather. This environmental expertise would prove crucial in understanding what I was about to encounter, though at the time, I had no idea how inadequate my knowledge would prove to be. The case that would alter the course of my career began with a phone call at 11:47 p.m. on March 18, 2024. I was at home in my Shelburne farmhouse, reading a forensic pathology journal and enjoying a glass of Vermont whiskey, when Detective Isabella Moreau of the Vermont State Police called. "Dr. Thorne, we've got something extraordinary up in Willoughby," Detective Moreau said, her voice carrying an unusual tension I hadn't heard in our 5 years of working together. a construction crew was renovating an old textile mill and found what appears to be a hidden chamber. There's a body inside, but Doc, this doesn't make sense from any angle we can figure. Detective Moreau was one of the most competent investigators I'd ever worked with. Itev, a former FBI profiler who had moved to Vermont seeking a quieter life, but brought big city investigative skills to rural cases. If she was puzzled, I knew we were dealing with something significant. What's the timeline? I asked, already reaching for my coat. That's just it, Dr. Thorne. Based on the architectural evidence and some documents we found, this chamber was sealed sometime in the 1940s. But the body, it looks like the person died yesterday. De Willoughby is a small town about 45 minutes northeast of Burlington, nestled in the Northeast Kingdom region of Vermont. It's the kind of place where everybody knows everybody, where the general store still serves as the town's social hub, and where mysteries tend to stay buried for generations. The drive through the Green Mountains that night was eerily beautiful. A late winter storm had left everything covered in fresh snow, and the full moon cast long shadows across the rural landscape. I had made this drive hundreds of times over the years, but something about this particular night felt different, charged with possibility and dread in equal measure. Detective Moreau had given me basic details over the phone. The Willoughby textile mill had been abandoned since 1978, when the last of the region's manufacturing jobs finally disappeared. A Boston development company had purchased the property 6 months earlier, with plans to convert it into luxury condominiums, part of Vermont's ongoing struggle between preservation and progress. The construction crew had been working on the building's foundation when they discovered what appeared to be a deliberate architectural anomaly. When they broke through a brick wall that seemed unnecessarily thick, they found a chamber that had been completely sealed off from the outside world. The Willoughby textile mill stood 4 stories tall along the Willoughby River, its red brick facade still imposing despite decades of neglect. Vermont State Police had cordoned off a 2-block area around the building, and I could see the bright lights of the crime scene investigation team working inside. Detective Moreau met me at the perimeter tape. Isabella was in her early 40s, with prematurely gray hair that she kept pulled back in a professional bun and sharp green eyes that missed nothing. She had worked serial killer cases in Boston before moving to Vermont, and her experience with unusual crime scenes was extensive. Dr. Thorne, I've got to prepare you for what you're about to see, she said as we walked toward the mill entrance. I've been doing this for 18 years, and I've never encountered anything like this. The construction foreman actually threw up when he saw the body, not because it was gruesome, but because it was so normal. The mill's interior retained much of its original character: high ceilings supported by massive wooden beams, large windows that had once provided natural light for textile workers, and the concrete floors designed to support heavy machinery. Our footsteps echoed in the empty space as Detective Moreau led me toward a staircase descending to the basement level. The basement of the Willoughby textile mill was a maze of support columns, utility tunnels, and storage areas. The construction crew had been working to update the building's electrical and plumbing systems when they encountered the anomalous wall section. Here's what doesn't make sense, Detective Moreau explained as we approached the discovery site. According to the original 1923 blueprints, this entire area should be open basement space, but when the crew started working, they found this wall that's about 18 inches thick, much thicker than necessary for structural support. The wall had been constructed from red brick identical to the rest of the building, but the mortar was slightly different in composition and color. To a casual observer, it would have been invisible. Only someone with construction expertise would have noticed the subtle difference that suggested this wall had been built separately from the original structure. They broke through here, Detective Moreau continued, pointing to a ragged hole in the brick wall about 3 feet wide. And that's when they found the chamber. The hidden chamber was approximately 12 feet long, 8 feet wide, and had a ceiling height of about 7 feet, large enough to serve as a small living space, but with no windows, no visible ventilation, and until the construction crew broke through, no apparent entrance or exit. The chamber had been furnished with care and attention to detail. There was a single bed with a metal frame and what appeared to be a high-quality mattress, still remarkably well preserved. A small wooden table held a kerosene lamp, several books, and a leather-bound journal. A wooden chair sat nearby, positioned as if someone had been reading. Against one wall stood a small chest of drawers containing neatly folded clothing, women's garments that appeared to be from the 1940s era. The styles were unmistakable: misera, high-waisted skirts, blouses with distinctive collar styles, and undergarments that reflected the fashion of that period. But it was the body that defied all logic and experience. Lying on the bed, covered with a wool blanket that showed no signs of deterioration, was the body of a woman who appeared to be in her mid-30s. She was dressed in a pale blue nightgown, her dark hair arranged neatly on the pillow, her hands folded peacefully across her chest. Every aspect of her appearance suggested that she had died within the past few days, not decades ago. Her skin retained its natural color and elasticity. Her hair showed no signs of brittleness or decay. Even her fingernails appeared healthy and well maintained. I had seen remarkably preserved remains before: victims of hypothermia found in glacial conditions, bodies discovered in peat bogs where the acidic environment prevented normal decomposition, even victims of certain poisonings that could slow decay. But this level of preservation, in an uncontrolled environment, after what appeared to be 80 years, was medically impossible. "Dr. Thorne," Detective Moreau said quietly, "I need you to tell me I'm not losing my mind. This woman looks like she died last week, not in the 1940s. I approached the bed and conducted a preliminary visual examination. The body showed no signs of rigor mortis, which typically dissipates after 48 and 72 hours. There was no detectable odor of decomposition, no bloating or discoloration typical of post-mortem changes. The skin felt cool, but retained the suppleness of living tissue." As I examined the scene, Detective Moreau showed me additional evidence they had discovered in the chamber. The leather-bound journal appeared to be a diary, with entries dating from 1943 to 1944. The handwriting was elegant and consistent, suggesting education and refinement. The books on the table were titles popular in the 1940s novels by authors like Agatha Christie and Somerset Maugham, along with poetry collections and what appeared to be medical texts. All were in remarkable condition, showing minimal signs of age, despite the decades that had passed. Most intriguingly, they had found a small collection of letters addressed to Miss Cordelia Blackthorne from various family members and friends, postmarked between 1942 and 1944. The letters painted a picture of a young woman who had worked as a nurse during World War II and had apparently been dealing with what the letters diplomatically referred to as nervous exhaustion. The final letter, dated September 15, 1944, was from someone signing themselves as "Your devoted brother Edmund." The letter expressed concern about Cordelia's decision to retreat from the world and begged her to reconsider her plans for isolation. While I continued my preliminary examination of the body, Detective Moreau consulted with the construction crew about the chamber's construction. The architectural evidence suggested that the chamber had been deliberately concealed during the mill's operation, possibly created by someone with intimate knowledge of the building's layout and access to construction materials. "The interesting thing," explained Jake Morrison, the construction foreman, "is that this wasn't a rush job. Someone took time to do this right. The ventilation system is subtle but functional. There are small shafts that connect to the building's main air circulation system. The electrical work, though primitive by today's standards, was professionally installed. The chamber had been designed to be completely self-contained while remaining connected to the building's basic utilities. Whoever had created this space had planned for long-term habitation, while ensuring complete secrecy from the outside world." As I documented every detail of the scene, I found myself increasingly disturbed, not by what I was seeing, but by what I wasn't seeing. There were no signs of struggle, no indications of trauma or violence, No evidence of the kind of desperation one might expect from someone walling themselves into a hidden chamber. Instead, everything about the scene suggested careful preparation and peaceful intention. The bed was neatly made. The personal belongings were arranged with care. Even Cordelia's position on the bed suggested that she had simply laid down and, decided to die, fallen into some kind of suspended animation. I had been trained to look for evidence, to find logical explanations for seemingly inexplicable situations. But as I stood in that hidden chamber, surrounded by evidence that challenged everything I knew about death and decomposition, I felt the first stirrings of something I had never experienced in my professional career: complete bewilderment. After nearly 3 hours at the scene, I made the decision to transport Cordelia Blackthorne's body to our facility for a complete autopsy. The preservation was so remarkable that I wanted to conduct the examination under controlled conditions, with access to all of our diagnostic equipment and the ability to collect samples for extensive testing. "Detective Moreau," I said as we prepared to leave the mill, "I need you to understand that what we're dealing with here challenges everything I know about forensic pathology. This level of preservation shouldn't be possible under these conditions." "What are you thinking, Doc? Some kind of experimental preservation technique? Maybe she was involved in medical research?" "I honestly don't know," I replied, which was not something I was accustomed to saying, "but I intend to find out." As we loaded the body into the medical examiner's transport vehicle, I took one last look at the hidden chamber. Something about the entire scene felt deliberate, as if Cordelia Blackthorne had orchestrated not just her death, but her preservation, though such a thing should have been impossible with 1940s technology. The drive back to Burlington gave me time to process what I had witnessed and begin formulating an investigation plan. I would need to conduct not just a standard autopsy, but the most comprehensive examination of my career. Tissue samples would need to be sent to specialized laboratories. I would need consultations with experts in historical preservation techniques, toxicology, and potentially even experimental medicine. But even as I planned my approach, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something fundamental about this case. The scene had been too perfect, too carefully arranged. It was as if Cordelia Blackthorne had wanted to be found, but only after a very specific amount of time had passed. As we crossed the Winooski River and approached Burlington, I made a decision that would prove prophetic. I would treat this not as a routine examination of historical remains, but as an active investigation into something that might challenge the very foundations of medical science. Back at the Riverside Regional facility, I spent the remainder of the night reviewing our protocols for unusual preservation cases and consulting reference materials on historical medical practices. I wanted to be prepared for anything when I began the autopsy the following morning. What I couldn't prepare for was what I would discover when I made the first incision into tissue that should have been desiccated and lifeless after 8 decades, but instead would cut as cleanly as if Cordelia Blackthorne had died just hours before I found her. The mystery of the woman in the hidden chamber was about to become something far more profound and disturbing than I could have imagined, and it would ultimately force me to question not just how she had died, but whether she had actually died at all. I arrived at Riverside Regional at 5:30 a.m. on March 19th, my mind racing with questions about what I had witnessed in that hidden chamber. Dr. Sarah Chen Rodriguez, my colleague and toxicology specialist, arrived to assist with what would become the most extraordinary examination of my career. At 8 a.m., with Detective Moreau present, I began the external examination. Cordelia Blackthorne's body showed no signs of the changes that occur after death. Her skin retained the suppleness of living tissue. Her hair felt soft and healthy. Her eyes were clear, not clouded as they should be after decades. "Sarah," I said quietly, "I want you to examine her hands." After several minutes, Dr. Chen Rodriguez looked at me with bewilderment. "Marcus, if I didn't know the context, I would swear this woman died within the past 12 hours. When I made the initial Y-shaped incision, the tissues cut cleanly with no signs of decay. Inside the thoracic cavity, I found something medically impossible. Cordelia's organs appeared to be in the exact condition they would be in a recently deceased person. Her heart muscle was supple, her lungs showed no collapse. This wasn't preservation, it was as if decomposition had simply been suspended. Over the following days, the test results would fundamentally challenge everything I thought I knew about death. The toxicology report showed traces of synthetic compounds that shouldn't have existed in the 1940s, along with botanical extracts from plants not native to North America. Dr. Patricia Howell, our chief toxicologist, called me personally. "Marcus, I've never seen anything like this profile. Some of these compounds couldn't have been synthesized with 1940s technology." The cellular analysis was even more extraordinary. Samples sent to Harvard Medical School revealed what specialists described as suspended animation. Dark cells showing neither deterioration associated with death, nor signs of active metabolism. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison from Harvard called directly. "These cells appear to be in a state we've never documented, neither alive nor dead in any conventional sense." Detective Moreau's investigation into Cordelia's background revealed disturbing details. She had been a World War II nurse who became obsessed with what she called the space between life and death. Her diary entries from 1943 to 1944 showed increasing isolation and fixation on crossing the threshold. One entry was particularly chilling. "I have found the place between breathing and not breathing. If I can learn to inhabit this space, I believe I can help others find peace, but the process requires complete isolation and absolute commitment." Her final entry, dated September 20th, 1944, was brief but definitive. "Tonight, I will cross the threshold and demonstrate that the boundary between life and death is not fixed. If my calculations are correct, I will remain in the crossing place until the world is ready to understand." Cordelia had liquidated her savings to construct her hidden chamber, telling the contractor she needed a secret storage room. She had spent months collecting rare botanical specimens and studying historical accounts of suspended animation. As results accumulated, we faced something that challenged medical science itself. Cordelia's brain tissue showed minimal but measurable electrical activity, not enough for consciousness, but far more than should exist in a deceased person. Dr. James Mackenzie, our neurological consultant, was baffled. "If I didn't know she'd been sealed away for 80 years, I'd say she's in a profound coma, not dead, but the absence of circulation makes that impossible." Dr. Chen Rodriguez made the breakthrough discovery. Among the botanical compounds, she identified rare plants used historically for death-like states, plus evidence that Cordelia had synthesized compounds similar to modern suspended animation inducers. "Marcus," Sarah told me, "Cordelia achieved something medical science wouldn't develop for another 50 years. She chemically induced a state that mimics death while preserving cellular integrity." The implications were staggering. Had Cordelia been waiting in that chamber for 80 years? Was she aware during decades of isolation? If one person could achieve this using 1940s resources, what did that mean for our understanding of death itself? The case attracted worldwide attention from researchers, but also skepticism. To confirm our findings, we conducted radiocarbon dating of tissues and belongings. Everything confirmed 1940s origin. Advanced analysis revealed no mutations or conditions explaining her preservation. The impossible conclusion: Cordelia Blackthorne had achieved controlled suspended animation using techniques theoretically impossible for her era. As the investigation concluded, I found myself profoundly changed. For 21 years, I had understood death as a predictable biological process, but Cordelia's case suggested the boundary between life and death was far more complex than medical science recognized. I began questioning every case from my career. How many times had I declared someone dead who might have been in suspended animation? How many families had I counseled based on incomplete understanding of what death actually means? For months, I lay awake, thinking about consciousness and awareness. Had Cordelia experienced those 80 years? The thought was horrifying. I started scrutinizing coma patients differently, wondering if some experienced suspended states rather than unconsciousness. 6 months later, I was examining a young woman found unresponsive after a car accident, declared brain dead by hospital staff. Her family faced organ donation decisions. As I conducted my examination, I noticed subtle signs that reminded me of Cordelia: a certain tissue quality, barely detectable cellular responsiveness. I found myself paralyzed by doubt. What if this woman wasn't actually dead? What if she was in a suspended state we couldn't detect? I completed my examination and provided official findings, but I knew I couldn't continue with this level of uncertainty. 3 weeks later, I submitted my resignation, citing personal reasons. The truth was that Cordelia Blackthorne had fundamentally altered my understanding of death and consciousness, making it impossible to continue in forensic pathology. I had spent my career providing definitive answers about death, but Cordelia showed me that death itself might be more complex than medical science recognized. How could I confidently declare patients' conditions when I'd witnessed something that challenged medicine's foundations? I moved to a small Vermont town and opened a general practice, deliberately avoiding cases involving consciousness or end-of-life decisions. But I never stopped thinking about Cordelia. I followed suspended animation research and consciousness studies, encouraged by findings that the brain remains active longer after clinical death than previously believed. Cordelia's case remains one of medicine's most documented examples of unexplained preservation. Her tissue samples continue being studied worldwide. The hidden chamber became an unofficial pilgrimage site for consciousness researchers. For me, Cordelia's case represents more than a medical anomaly. It's a reminder that consciousness and death are more mysterious than we understand. It raises fundamental questions about end-of-life decisions, death definition, and the boundary between consciousness and unconsciousness. If Cordelia achieved suspended animation with 1940s techniques, what's possible with modern medicine? More importantly, how many patients we consider vegetative might be experiencing suspended consciousness we can't detect? The most important lesson is deeply human. People we declare dead or unconscious may be experiencing states our medical understanding cannot explain. Cordelia's 80 years gave science an unprecedented study opportunity, but also represents an individual human experience we can barely comprehend. Cordelia Blackthorne's case will always remain my most unexplained and humbling medical experience. It taught me that medicine, despite its advances, contains profound mysteries challenging our basic assumptions about life, death, and consciousness. It forced me to confront that death might not be the fixed, irreversible process medical science believes, but a complex transition that can be influenced, delayed, or temporarily reversed under circumstances we're only beginning to understand. Most importantly, it reminded me that every case involves not just medical questions, but fundamental questions about human existence, consciousness, and what it truly means to be alive. Cordelia achieved something medically impossible. She demonstrated that life-death boundaries are more complex than we imagined. In doing so, she changed not just my understanding of pathology, but of human existence itself. The woman in the hidden chamber remains proof that medicine's greatest mysteries aren't technical puzzles, but profound questions about consciousness, identity, and what it means to be truly alive.